Video Science, Geology with Mr. Jaffe.
Seems like we're always building things in New York City. Building buildings up, and we need to dig holes to make the foundations for those buildings. But when people start digging under the ground, what are they going to find? Well, they're going to find a lot of soil, but they're also going to find a lot of something else. A lot of rock. Because rock is what's under the ground. It's what the Earth's crust is made out of. And that's what we're going to be looking at today on Video Science. Lots of rock. Let's go outside and look for some rocks. Here's one right here. You remember we learned about solids and liquids and gases. We talked about looking at matter and talking about its properties. Well, what are the properties of this big rock? Well, first of all, why don't you stop and think about what color it is? How would you describe this? Well, I'd say it's got some dark spots. It's got some white parts. What is this? This is a kind of rock called granite. Now, rocks are made up of something called minerals. There's lots of minerals inside this rock, and because they're all stuck together like little grains, we call it granite. Granite is a great earth material that you can build with. And if we look right down here, we can see some more granite. You know granite because it's got all these spots. This granite has been cut and polished into little squares called cobblestones. And look over here. Look what we find here. Now this isn't a rock. This is a huge piece of metal called iron. And under here is a drainage system to drain the water to the river. This iron was made by taking a mineral called iron from the ground. There's another earth material for you right there. Let's keep looking around and find out how rock changes into different sizes in our world. I better be careful balancing on these rocks. Oh look, these rocks are different sizes. This one here is almost as big as the first one we looked at, but these ones over here are smaller. I can almost pick these up. Rocks can be many different sizes in our world. And when you start thinking more about rocks and you start studying them, you become a kind of scientist called a geologist. The word geo means earth. And ologist, well, you know what that means. That means knowledge, or someone that collects knowledge. So a geologist is someone that studies rocks. Rocks can be all different sizes, and they can be made of different stuff, different types of minerals. Any good geologist looks for things they can notice about rocks in our world. And I bet you can be a good geologist today. Check out what's happening with this rock down here. What would you say is happening to it? If you said it's cracking, you're right. The kind of thing that might have cracked this rock in half are two things: pressure or temperature, or both. Remember, when rock gets warm, it expands. When rock gets cool, it contracts or gets smaller. And all of that pushing and pulling on the rock is too much for it, and eventually it cracks. What do we do with pieces of rock? Well, we can do things like cut them into cubes to build bridges. We can use the iron that we found in the ground to make giant girders, to do things like make our wonderful Manhattan Bridge up there that carries all those trains across the East River. I love discovering things about rocks. But before we go, let's talk about the three types of rocks that we're going to be looking at in this unit.
Igneous rock, formed by volcanic activity. Sedimentary rock, formed by sediment settling at the bottom of an ancient ocean. And metamorphic rock, formed by pressure underneath the earth.
If you hold this rock in the light and you move it back and forth, you can see something kind of sparkly in there. That's because there's a mineral called mica. Remember, we said rocks are made of minerals, and that sparkly mineral you see in there, in this piece of granite, is called mica. Remember, rocks are made of minerals. Almost all these rocks were formed billions of years ago. Rocks are very, very old and can have layers of different minerals in them. Even if I don't know exactly what minerals are in this rock, I can tell that it's got layers of different ones. Look at this, the properties of this layer. It's got kind of a whitish color to it. And the properties of this layer, it's dark and shiny, almost like glass. So you can learn a lot about rocks, even if you don't know all the words yet. And we're gonna learn them all. Let's check out some other ways that we find rocks around here. How do rocks get smaller? Well, take a look at these forces over here. We've got some water coming up from the East River as it moves down out into the ocean. Sometimes the wind or other kinds of effects like currents push the water up on to the rocks, and slowly over time, rocks can get pounded into sand, which can also be called sediment. But guess what else? Some of this sand could have come from further upriver. That's right. Sediment can be carried by water as it moves along. So all the forces in our world change rocks. Even though rocks are big, and sometimes rocks can be very hard, they can be changed by forces. With all this water moving around, the rocks are going to break down even more in a river. Starting with rocks, they get smaller and become pebbles. Then later, they become sand. And after sand, if you keep going even smaller, you get to silt and clay. Now you know clay from things that you might have made in school, but silt is some of the stuff that makes water seem cloudy. Guess what? That's actually tiny, 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 tiny particles of rock. It never goes away.
Thanks for watching. See you next time.
Scrambles, do you like science?